On October 5, 2018, 27-year-old production assistant Terrence Woods was working with a production company filming a documentary series about the abandoned Penman mine gold site in Idaho. As the crew was wrapping up for the day and packing up equipment, Terrence suddenly jumped off a cliff and bolted into the dense forest, shocking the entire team. Before anyone could react, Terrence vanished without a trace. Years have passed, and yet there's no clue as to what happened to Terrence Woods. Why did he suddenly run down a steep slope into the forest, risking his life? What is the film crew hiding? The same team that left Idaho immediately after Terrence's disappearance. Why did Woods want to cut his work trip short and return home weeks ahead of schedule? And what exactly did he take out of the car right before he suddenly sprinted into the woods? Terrence Woods Jr. was born in Capitol Heights, Maryland, where he lived with his parents and 3 other siblings. After graduating from the University of Maryland, he moved to the UK and attended Richmond University in London. By the age of 26, Terrence had traveled the world, working with production teams in some of the most remote corners of the globe. His resume included work on several major British shows, such as The Voice UK and Saving Africa's Elephants. The next project was meant to be an impressive addition to his career. In October 2018, Terrence traveled to Idaho's Clearwater National Forest with the London-based production company Raw TV, which produced the Discovery Channel's popular show, Gold Rush. The crew was filming a new series about the abandoned Penman mine, titled Whitewater. Terrence was scheduled to be on location for several weeks, from October 1st to mid-November. Including Terrence, the crew consisted of 12 people. On September 30th, 2018, Terrence's father dropped him off at the airport in Maryland. From the moment he landed on October 1st until October 5th, Terrence was based in Montana. During this time, he appeared to be in great spirits, sending his father scenic photos and assuring him everything was going well. On the afternoon of October 5th, Terrence sent his father a video showing a calm river winding through a rocky canyon. He included no coordinates or further explanation. Later, during an investigation led by a Washington news outlet, a reporter who saw the video described it as eerily unsettling. 3 a.m., October 5th, 2018. Terrence called his father to let him know that he had arrived in Idaho and was doing fine. They exchanged a few words, and Mr. Woods suggested they talk again later that day. 5:44 a.m., October 5th, 2018. Terrence texted his father again, writing, "I'll be home Wednesday the 10th, October 10th, 2018. This meant he was planning to return home earlier than scheduled, something Terrence had never done before. He was originally supposed to stay in Idaho working on the show until mid-November. It was later discovered that he decided to cut his trip short because his mother had fallen ill. Although his mother, Valerie Woods, told him before he disappeared that she likely wouldn't need the surgery she was initially worried about, Terrence still decided to fly home to Maryland to be with her. At least that's what he wrote in an email to the production company he was working for. 3 p.m., October 5th, 2018. Terrence's father responded to his message, but by that time the film crew had already driven out to the remote Penman mine site, hours from their hotel and with no cell reception. Given what happened later, Mr. Woods isn't even sure if his son ever saw the reply. Later that day, midday to early evening, the team spent the day filming in the mountainous area around Penman Mine. What happened next remains unexplainable, said assistant producer Simon G. Simon recalled, "We were wrapping up for the day, and Terrence was talking to a local woman named Cherie. I was sitting in the car, doing some work, when Terrence told her he needed to use the bathroom. Something, maybe a gut feeling, told me to look over toward the cliff where he was. All I saw was a walkie-talkie lying on the ground. At first I thought he had fallen, so I jumped out of the car and ran over. To my shock, he hadn't fallen. He was already 5 meters down the slope and running fast, like incredibly fast. He was bouncing like a rabbit. I've never seen anyone move like that. I yelled at the guys to get in the car and drive around to the main road to intercept him. I kept going down after him, but since I'm trained in search and rescue, I knew that chasing him might scare him more. So I stopped and turned back. Unfortunately, the team didn't manage to intercept him, but we found a house with a phone and reported him missing. Later, it was revealed that the crew ran to the nearest home, that of Benny and Marianne York, asking at the door if they had a phone. The Yorks didn't, but they led them to a neighbor's house that had Wi-Fi. The film crew was then able to report Terrence missing. This is how the 911 call at 6:41 p.m. on October 5th was recorded. Male, Terrence Woods, 27, from London, working for a TV company filming in the Penman mine area, has never been in the woods before. No weapons. Terrence has been going through an emotional time and had a breakdown today, wearing light-colored clothing, not responding to radio, no communication devices. He is currently being searched for. Cherie, the local woman hired to help the crew move equipment, was present that day and confirmed Simon's version of events. Local law enforcement described her as a highly reliable witness. The woman said that the filming day on October 5, 2018, went completely normally, without any conflicts. The crew noted that Terrence had been noticeably quieter and calmer than usual that day, but Cherie, who spoke with him just before his sudden disappearance, said he seemed fine, just a bit distracted. Overall, Cherie recalled that they had talked a lot with Terrence throughout the day, and from what he shared, it seemed his family situation wasn't very stable. He mentioned that freelance work didn't provide steady income, and that his parents either couldn't or wouldn't help him. Just before his mysterious departure, Terrence told Cherie he was tired of being far from home and wanted to go back to fix his life. While he was pulling something out of the car, Cherie told him she thought that was the right decision. Cherie remembers, "He gave me a strange look, like he didn't hear me. I was about to repeat myself when the crew got distracted by someone shouting happily that the day was over and it was time to pack up." On the morning of Saturday, October 6th, Simon had a difficult call to make to Terrence's father. According to Terrence Woods Jr., it was an extremely strange conversation. Instead of getting to the point or preparing the father for bad news, Simon began by saying, "Terrence came highly recommended, and we chose him immediately. But when I met your son, I realized he wasn't what I expected. I gave him tasks and he didn't know what to do." Only after the father insisted did Simon finally get to the point and told him that Terrence had suddenly taken off running down a cliff and disappeared. Police weren't contacted until nearly 7 p.m., so the search didn't begin until the next morning. Various search teams were formed, but they faced several challenges due to snowy weather. Search dogs were brought in, and a helicopter with thermal imaging scanned the area from above. There were even searchers on horseback, but the terrain made things difficult. One person noted, "You couldn't even walk through there, just trees and brush everywhere." By midweek, heavy rain and snow in the mountains grounded the helicopter. Terrence's parents, Valerie and Terrence Woods Sr., flew to Idaho to help with the search and began distributing flyers. After 7 days, the search area was expanded because no trace of Terrence had been found. At one point, law enforcement visited Terrence's hotel room to confirm it was still locked. However, crew members had already entered his room to retrieve some of his clothing for scent-tracking dogs. Inside, they found suitcases packed for his planned return home and a jacket lying on the bed. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary. The only slightly odd detail was that the curtains had been pulled extremely tightly shut, though that could have meant nothing. Police also found Terrence's journal, where he had written about a big reset and a desire to change his life. However, officers said the handwriting was barely legible and ultimately gave the journal to his parents. In addition, Terrence had left behind a backpack at the filming location. Inside the bag were camera cases, batteries, markers, over-the-counter painkillers, hand cream, an iPhone charger, a 3-inch folding knife, and a stun gun. Based on the contents, it appeared that Terrence had his phone with him when he ran into the woods. However, according to media reports, police never requested Terrence's phone records or checked his internet search history or activity on his computer. In both cases, it would have been necessary to go to a judge and obtain a warrant, which would require proof that a crime had been committed or that Terrence was in danger. But the police had already decided that Terrence chose to disappear voluntarily. At least that's the conclusion one might draw from an interview with the sheriff. Sheriff Doug Giddings said, "The search and rescue guys will tell you Terrence wasn't in that area. The area we searched. They believe he ran down the slope and made it to the road. After that, they don't know where he went. They said that if he were injured, the dogs would have found him." However, another officer was shocked Terrence could have made it out of that terrain at all. Most of the forest floor was covered in fallen pine trees, thick trunks that had collapsed year after year. The officer described it like trying to walk across a giant game of pickup sticks, where the logs were so big your feet never touched the ground. Search teams found no footprints in the fresh snow and no indication that Terrence had ever been there. Police were convinced that if he had suffered an accident or been the victim of a crime, scent dogs would have found him, or evidence of a suspect. But they didn't. Terrence vanished without a trace. What made this case even more disturbing was that another person disappeared from the same area around the same time, also without a trace. 76-year-old Connie Johnson. In October 2018, Connie Marie Johnson was working as a cook for Ritchie Outfitters, a hunting camp based in Salmon, Idaho, in the remote wilderness near Big Fog Mountain, close to Big Rock and Grangeville. The area was so remote it was only accessible by foot or horseback. But Connie was no stranger to such conditions. She had previously worked as a U.S. Forest Service ranger at the Moose Creek Ranger Station. She was also a member of the Selway Bitterroot Foundation, often leading wilderness groups through the region. Her friends said Connie had extensive survival skills and always knew what to do in extreme situations. She was last seen on October 2, 2018, when a group of hunters left the camp. According to Sheriff Giddings, the next day the hunters couldn't make radio contact with Connie. Either the signal was weak or something else prevented clear communication. But her words were unintelligible. When they returned to camp on October 5th, both Connie and her dog, Ace, were gone. Just like in Terrence's case, search teams combed the forest using dogs and a helicopter equipped with infrared sensors. Chris Adkins, a former co-worker, said, "It's just impossible to believe. This wasn't her first trip. She spent the last 25 years of her life in the backcountry doing ranger work. If there's anyone with the skills to survive out there, it's Connie." But no trace of Connie was ever found, and the official search ended on October the 16th. Then 3 weeks later, her dog Ace showed up at the Moose Creek Ranger Station, nearly 15 miles, 24 kilometers from the hunting camp, alone. He was hungry but otherwise okay. He was fed, examined, and search teams tried to use him to lead them back into the wilderness, but the attempt failed. What happened to Connie and Terrence in October 2018? Given Connie's vast experience, especially in that exact wilderness area, she was well prepared to survive. Did she fall? Was there an accident? Or did something far more sinister happen? And what made Terrence run into the forest like he had seen something, never to return? There are a few theories about what might have happened, but not a single one can tie all the pieces together. It was very cold that October night. This might have contributed to the young man's death. Many people have heard of the strange phenomenon where, in the final stages of extreme hypothermia, a person begins to remove their clothing as if they're suddenly overheating, a reaction known as paradoxical undressing. But one of the most common challenges in finding someone lost in the forest during cold conditions is a lesser-known physiological response called terminal burrowing. As the body shuts down, a freezing person will often try to dig into the ground or wedge themselves into tight, hidden spaces, as if instinctively searching for shelter. This behavior can make it nearly impossible to find them, even when searchers are very close. Penman Mine is located in the Oro Grande area, which is part of the vast Clearwater National Forest. The forest spans over 9,000 square kilometers and consists of 4 separate regions of untouched wilderness. The forested mountains are home to gray wolves, raccoons, moose, black bears, coyotes, mountain lions, and many other wild animals. Benny York confirmed that he had indeed seen mountain lion tracks in the snow near the Penman Mine area. However, if Terrence had suddenly become afraid of wild animals, why would he leave all of his gear, including any weapons, in his backpack and run straight into the dense forest, where the chance of encountering a wild predator was even higher? This brings us back to the central question: why did he start running at all? Perhaps his parents hold the key to understanding that. Believe that their son's disappearance was connected to how he was treated by the film crew, and they're not convinced the production company provided them with the full truth about what really happened. The family remains skeptical of the claim that their son could have sprinted down such a steep, rugged slope as found in that area. You're telling me that my son, who weighs around 110 pounds, ran down that hill without tripping, falling, or injuring himself? You didn't find a single drop of blood, not a shred of clothing, and he ran so fast no one could catch him? Terrence's father asked incredulously. Sheriff Giddings admitted that the father's reasoning made sense, but pointed out that other crew members also chased after Terrence and weren't seriously hurt. Something criminal happened, and they're covering it up, Terrence's father declared. My son saw or heard something he didn't agree with, and he wanted to leave. The Woods family also felt that the crew did very little to help search for their son, aside from booking the parents' plane tickets to Idaho. They recalled that only Simon G. met them on site, even though they had been told the entire crew would be there to support them. Despite repeated attempts to get the names of all the crew members so they could speak with each one individually and hear their version of events, the family was denied access to that information since this was not a criminal investigation and no one was obligated to disclose any identities. What made things feel even stranger for the Woods family was how some crew members reportedly described Terrence as mentally unstable, something that completely contradicted his personality. That's complete nonsense, said Cassandra Hall Alexander, a friend and former colleague. I worked with Terrence for 6 months on a TV production. He always exceeded expectations and never once showed any signs of mental distress. Later, Simon claimed the crew never actually said those words, suggesting the cameraman may have misheard something, but the damage had already been done and the family was left with deep suspicion. Another detail that raised red flags. The film crew rented 2 vehicles from a local car rental agency, yet only returned 1. Still, law enforcement dismissed the family's doubts, maintaining that there was no evidence of a crime or of any mistreatment toward Terrence. They want to believe the company is hiding something, but we didn't find anything to support that, said Sheriff Giddings. He added that Terrence had seemed a bit different from the rest of the crew. He joined the production last, and there were some concerns about his behavior, but nothing serious enough to blow out of proportion like the parents have. We confirmed that he felt uncomfortable, and some of his colleagues felt uncomfortable around him. However, this version of events directly contradicts the testimony of a local woman named Cherie, who was present on the final day of filming. She said everything had seemed fine. The crew was talking, laughing, having lunch together, and Terrence didn't seem gloomy or disturbed. She did note that he seemed somewhat distracted. For example, when asked to pass some camera lenses that were right in front of him, he struggled to find them, almost as if his mind was elsewhere all day. Still, Cherie emphasized that the crew was keeping an eye on him and made sure he was okay. After Terrence suddenly bolted into the woods, Simon quickly organized a search effort, splitting the crew into 2 teams, one to search for Terrence and the other to locate a phone and call the police. He even instructed everyone not to call out Terrence's name, fearing it might scare him even more. Cherie recalls that Simon stayed on the phone all day, without sleep or rest, trying to coordinate efforts to find Terrence. Police believe that Terrence chose to disappear on his own. Sheriff Giddings said the 2 key witnesses were Sherry and Simon, and both of them told the exact same story. Terrence suddenly, without saying a word, ran down the slope and didn't stop when others from the crew tried to chase after him. Some speculated that Terrence may have suffered from altitude sickness, the inability to adapt to low oxygen levels at higher elevations, and ran downhill in a panic. But as the sheriff rightly points out, even if he made it to the road, where he could have caught his breath and gathered his thoughts, Terrence never stopped at a single house to ask for help. This is difficult terrain with a lot of mines. Anything can happen, but we looked for him, Giddings said. The mention of mines is no accident. The area is riddled with abandoned mine shafts and deep ventilation holes, which locals know well. Many of them are completely unmarked and hidden beneath fallen leaves and branches. If Terrence stepped on one, he could have easily fallen in. Sherry and her husband also shared another important detail. Search efforts were focused on the south side of the slope, even though based on the direction Terrence ran, they should have searched the north side. So the couple took it upon themselves to explore that area. They soon found a broken branch, as if someone had grabbed it while running, and a flattened patch of ground like someone had rested there. They convinced police to search the north side, though they didn't mention the branch or disturbed ground. When search dogs arrived, one immediately led officers to that same patch of flattened ground. Forensic investigators collected the branch for DNA testing, but the results of that analysis were never released. Sherry also recalls that while speaking with her, Terrence pulled something from his car. He planned this, she insists. He planned this. It's also worth noting that 44 hours passed between his disappearance and the time his name was entered into the National Missing Persons Database, a significant window for someone who may have wanted to disappear completely. Could Terrence have run away? It seems possible, but why would he if he was already planning to return home early? Maybe he wasn't just fleeing the job, maybe he was running from his entire life. In his journal, Terrence mentioned a big reset, writing that he was tired of traveling and ready to settle down. Several entries show he had grown weary of life in London and being constantly on the move. Friends say he didn't really want to go on this trip, and they later found his messages leading up to it rather strange. They also noticed that his behavior during this project didn't match how he acted normally. Washington journalist Melanie Alnwick, who conducted her own investigation, spoke with Terrence's London friend, Sherlyn Andrew Wilfred. Sherlyn shared that she, Terrence, and another friend had a WhatsApp group chat. After his disappearance, the chat naturally went quiet until February 4th, 2019, months after Terrence went missing. One of the friends sent Sherlyn a screenshot showing a red notification. Terrence left the group. Is that even possible? It's highly unlikely that anyone would go through the trouble of logging into his account, guessing passwords, just to remove him from a group chat. But the message was real. Melanie contacted WhatsApp support. Of course, they didn't provide her with any specific data related to Terrence Woods' account, But they did explain that after 45 days of inactivity, an account may be automatically deactivated. However, Sherlyn wasn't ready to give up just yet. Sometime later, she tried sending Terrence a message again. And this time, she received a very strange notification. Terrence Woods is registered as a business account. This meant the account was now linked to a company profile. You couldn't just message it freely, as it belonged to a closed group for employees only. The date was June 30th, 2019. Another technical glitch? Or something more? If Terrence Woods really chose to disappear, he had every chance to do so. He didn't own a car, had no active bank loans, and his phone, wallet, and passport were never found. Given the 44-hour window before he was officially declared missing, he could be anywhere by now. To this day, the case remains a complete mystery. Terrence's father still believes a crime occurred, but he and the rest of the family and friends just hope for answers someday. "It eats at me every single day," says Terrence Woods Sr. "With death, at some point, you can learn to cope and accept it. But with not knowing, you can't. It doesn't let you rest. All we can do is pray and keep believing."